Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar news update video. So we've got a few things to cover here. First of all, first four figures, the pre-order is live now for the Aang Bust that they've been teasing for the last couple of days. So of course there's three versions. We have the pricing now: standard version, exclusive edition, and definitive edition. So $250 for the basic, $270 for the exclusive, and $370 for the definitive edition. If you look at their other busts, this is actually pretty much their cheapest bust. In terms of the standard edition release, most of their other bust standard editions come in at like $350 and above. So the Aang being $250 is actually cheaper than expected. I think I expected it to be a little bit cheaper than some of their other stuff just because the Aang as a bust is a somewhat simple sculpt. Like, there's a lot of smooth surfaces and not a lot of detailing kind of necessarily. Most of, I think, what's going on here is in, I think, just the paint work on like the eyes, getting the expression right. So I don't think they could have charged like that crazy price for as simple of a sculpt as it sort of is. I think it looks really nice. It's just, one, it's still on the higher end of things, and that's always going to be a tough purchase, buying a figure that costs this much. Two, it's a bust. That's a very specific type of figure, and not everyone is into them. And that's the main thing here. That's why I'm not going to be getting any of these, unfortunately. As cool as they are, in the sense, like your standard one here, the slightly more expensive one has some kind of lights here for the air symbol, and also you get the staff over his shoulder. And then the super fancy version brings in arms here in a nice pose. Also has the staff and the electronics, but also you have Momo on the shoulder now. So it's a pretty significant upgrade, but like $100 extra. It's a bit of a kind of tough one here, because when you see this one and how expensive it is, you're kind of like, yeah, this one does look a little plain, but you're paying for a lot for how much extra it is. So it's cool. We'll wait and see if they're doing more kind of busts at some point down the line. I almost would be kind of like, can we hold off a little bit, and like, can you get a figure out for like the Aang movie when it hits, or Seven Havens when it hits, rather than everyone continuing to do like the original show stuff. But you know, they're doing their thing right now, and it's there if you want it. So pre-orders are open for today, and there's some sort of a deal on, I think, for the first month. But we'll move on to some Netflix Avatar news. So the first one is kind of interesting because basically what it is that Maya Chek, who plays Toph, was basically asked, you know, hey, when can we expect season 2? And she's not sure. They're trying to keep expectations realistic. Early 2026, maybe, with the hope that maybe it can be done a little bit quicker than that. But again, keep in mind, this is an actor. How informed is she about the exact specifics of when the show is actually going to be kind of coming out? It's very hard to judge, because I would say probably the rumor, not even rumors, just I think the predictions from most people kind of following these things was probably more for maybe middle, leaning into late 2026. But given that they're not using the volume anymore, and that caused some issues with them with the season 1 production, maybe things are going to be a lot smoother and they can get it out earlier. But I would say, like, the second I heard early 2026, I was a little surprised when I heard that. Like, that's a bit like, whoa, they could actually hit like January or February potentially. Now, again, it's just she believes this could be the case. It's not really any sort of confirmation. It's just, hey, someone involved in the production seems to, while being realistic potentially, think it could be early 2026. We'll see what actually happens, of course. So that would put it, like it says here, as being roughly exactly 2 years on from the season 1 release date, of course. So then we get into what is more of the actual headline here. Now, I think this is a piece of news we've known for a while now, but it's worth bringing up again while speculating about the release date, which is that Netflix and Avatar Studios Paramount are going to work together to coordinate the release schedule of these projects. Now, keep in mind, there's a lot of stuff on the move here that realistically what comes into play here is Book 2, so Season 2 of Netflix Avatar, The Legend of Aang, The Last Airbender, the animated movie from Avatar Studios, Avatar 7 Havens, and I think even Season 3 of Netflix Avatar probably comes into play if we bring everything together. Because the idea is that the only one of these things with an actual locked-in release date currently is the Aang movie, which is January 30th. But even then, when you actually look at the way the information is coming out, would you be super solid and confident about that? Like, is there official social media accounts posting about this? In terms of the Avatar stuff, no. They've not really wanted to claim this release date. So I do think it is a little bit up in the air and not as locked in as it perhaps seems. I think everyone's been assuming to a certain degree that it will at least move its release date, even if it is not a significant delay. So the speculation in the article is that, hey, what if we do one every quarter? Maybe the Aang movie stays in Q1, January, and the Netflix show then goes in Q2 a couple months later. Then Avatar 7 Havens, the series, could be more Q3, Q4, and then who knows? Maybe by that time, once 7 Havens airs, maybe Season 3 for early 2027, and that's how you make this happen. So that's the kind of interesting point, because yeah, there's, I think it makes sense if they're going to film Season 2 and 3 back to back, as in like they're going to start in May filming for Season 3. Yeah, I think it is probably only going to be about a year between Season 2 and 3. That would make sense. But the big thing here is, okay, how do we deal with the fact that potentially Netflix Avatar Season 2 is going to be ready in early 2026, but that's also effectively the release date for the Aang movie is also early 2026. So are we going to commit to the Aang movie as first and Netflix will go second, and they just have to balance, you know, not holding on to it too long to get out of the movie's way? Or are we maybe going to accept that the Aang movie does need to be delayed? We move that into, I don't know, late February, March, maybe April. I think anything beyond that would probably be too big of a delay. And that then leaves the Netflix show free to have its early slot in maybe late January, or what might be more fitting, maybe claiming the February date that effectively would make it exactly 2 years on from Season 1. You then have to ask questions of like, okay, if they're actually going to coordinate in a way that's not just getting out of each other's way, but actually in a way that can help each other out, then what one should go first? In my mind, because the Netflix show is sort of the known quantity, I would probably say it should go first. That way people get back into it, like, okay, Season 2, great. And then there'll be marketing stuff for the movie coming out probably in or around that time. And then you give it its couple of weeks to get its usual, you know, Netflix focus, where it is the big thing on Netflix for a while. But I don't think you need to wait months. Because it's a Netflix show, you only, I think, need to give them a couple of weeks. 1 month kind of, it feels like, at most. And then you can straight away, I think, put out the Aang movie if you want to. I don't think there needs to be a giant gap if you do it that way. You might want to maybe have a bit more of a gap if you do it the other way, where maybe the movie goes first, leading into the Netflix show, but it's hard to kind of necessarily judge. And then also just from a perspective of what's going to help things, I do think it's more the case that like the Netflix show will help the movie rather than the movie will help the Netflix show, just because one is an adaptation and then one is like sequel basically content with the gang as adults. And I think it makes a bit more sense if you do adaptation then movie. But that is assuming that they're planning to collab their dates in that way. Then of course, you know, 7 Havens, which we do assume to, again, the idea of what they've said the plan for Avatar Studios is, given the kind of planned schedule up on screen here, where there is immediately another series also in the planning after 7 Havens and more beyond that, more movies on the way, is that when it finally gets going, there will be a lot of stuff and you won't be waiting an eternity between each project. So if they're going to keep that going, 7 Havens probably has to drop basically the same year Netflix Avatar comes out. The movie comes out. So that puts that at the very least at like late 2026. And then probably the thing you're dealing with then is you probably want to manage the idea of how late in the year is Seven Havens. And if it's going to air episodes weekly for like, 13 weeks or whatever, how that cycle will potentially overlap with maybe you wanting an early 2027 release for season 3 of Netflix Avatar. You might want to push maybe Seven Havens a little earlier in the year, especially if like the movie still ends up being early-ish in the year and not more towards the middle. Maybe having Seven Havens be more like August release rather than maybe a November release might be a bit better, but we just don't know. It's crazy speculation about stuff that we know so little about, but it's worth keeping in mind that apparently this is the case. They are going to work together for a schedule that will work out nicely, but it also means that the Aang movie has a lot that it has to deal with. It has to kind of stay out of the way of James Cameron's Avatar in December. Now potentially it might have to adjust its date to account to a certain extent for Netflix Avatar happening around the same time. It's complicated, and you can see why like they've had to overthink, I think, the title so much of that movie. The same goes for the scheduling, and I think that's part of why they haven't maybe locked down as much information as we want to publicly. Next is just some casting information where there's not too much to say. It seems like this is an exclusive here from Night Edge Media. Angela Najjar has been cast as Jin, it seems like. So this is cool just from the perspective of, I don't know the actress, so just knowing that, okay, Jin's going to be in, that means at the very least they're doing that, the Tale of Zuko from Tales of Ba Sing Se. So they're not skipping that episode, at least in its entirety, but you wonder maybe what this means perhaps for maybe the song scene earlier on in the season. Are they going to keep that in from an earlier episode, or will the Jin scene kind of act as that scene just a little bit later on? I'm assuming they do want to put heavy focus on Ba Sing Se, and they might end up cutting more stuff from early on in the season, because we still have to deal with the fact that there's probably going to be some sort of a story conceit about, there's been a time skip that isn't present kind of elsewhere, but there kind of has to be, because there has actually been a pretty big delay in production, just in terms of waiting to see how the production goes and how it is received. So they can plan things out a little bit better from this point on. What does it all mean? I'd be super surprised, because Jin is a fan favorite character. She's getting a novel in just a few months, of course, in July. I'd be really surprised if Jin has a particularly expanded role or anything like that. That's just kind of where we're at. But that's just what we're dealing with right now. So there's that. And then there's also this one, which is apparently an actor involved, but we don't know who he is playing. So Gabriel Prevost Takahashi is going to be appearing in the first few episodes, but his role is under wraps. So who's he going to be? I don't know, like Liu Bei Fong? That would be a few early episode appearances. That could work, maybe. Xin Fu, Master Yu. But like if they do the metal bending scene, which I don't think they're not going to, that might be one of the later episodes rather than the first few episodes. They'd be involved in that. Are we talking about like General Fong, or like just an Earth Kingdom general they kind of meet along the way? Or is he just going to be a villager in one of the episodes where they have some of that stuff happen? It's difficult to predict, because you don't know if, like, is this person going to be playing a character of any note, or is it just going to be a random character? It's hard to judge. But that is it for, I suppose, the Netflix Avatar news. Some acting stuff, but mainly just the idea of there's a chance, maybe, possibly, even though it's absolutely not locked in, for early 2026 for Netflix Avatar Season 2, but also combined with the fact that Netflix and Avatar Studios are going to work to make the schedule efficient, I suppose. We'll end with just the final piece of news, which is this. Legacy of Yangchen Paperback has been announced. So here is the cover. You can see here it's slightly adjusted, a little bit more adjusted than some of the more recent ones. You can see Kavik, they've actually kind of flipped him. They've made him a lot bigger. They've put him behind Yangchen. The air temple is nowhere near as prevalent here as it was on the original cover. and that's fine. I like the only slight adjustments to the cover on these, and it's just nice to see that they are coming out. 28th of October for this one. Again, remember that the Dawn of Yangchen Paperback is the 24th of June. Both of these are going to release this year, and my assumption will be at the very least next year we will hear about the Reckoning of Roku getting a paperback. Awakening, they might wait a little bit longer, but you know, we're finally getting back on track when it comes to stuff like this. It's clearly a lot of the paperback stuff was delayed because of COVID and stuff like that. So we're going to see the paperbacks actually releasing a lot closer to the original release going forward, I think. But yeah, I'll just end with just a quick note of like I said before, there is the Jin novel here, just in case anyone's wondering. So that might factor into her having maybe a bigger role. It's hard to say. We do have bigger releases coming out, like Light It Up, the kids novel, Beast of the Four Nations in September, of course, Awakening of Roku in October. And again, we're waiting for a lot of stuff with these, like covers, description for the Awakening of Roku, other announcements for other comics, like what's the next Avatar, next Korra comic. Because obviously in or around July, we're going to have San Diego Comic-Con, where at the very least we should have a publishing panel, and we will get more announcements, because the publishing is beginning to stack up a little bit. We have books announced up to December with this Paint with Water book, but also the sticker book. And of course, the movie currently is scheduled for January. So if they're going to have publishing coming out alongside the movie, that stuff's going to have to be solicited at some point soon ahead of release, because you can see the James Cameron Avatar movie has some books scheduled for like release day basically. We're going to have to be in that position ourselves roughly, and you have to factor that into play as well. So yeah, that's going to be the video. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are. The Aang Bust, what are your thoughts on, I suppose, mainly the pricing? Does it interest you at all? Some kind of interesting Netflix Avatar news here with some casting and some maybe release date speculation, and also the Legacy of Yangchen Paperback. But otherwise, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.